Good morning. I'm Michael Callas. I'm coming to you from Bratislava, Slovakia, for this very first panel of the virtual FinTech Fair. Before we get started, I'd like to thank Mushir for his hard work in getting this all set up, and of course, his team of Shika and Ruby. In addition, I'd love to thank my team at Vacuumlabs, led by Mickey, supported by Mishka and Kika, and of course, Marcel Klimo, our tech evangelist. This morning's topic is going to be exploring what the effect of virtual banks are having on the Pan-Asian ecosystem of partners and or other enablers of FinTech. I represent a firm called Vacuumlabs, and we are about a 210-person operation out of Slovakia. And we've been in operation for about 8 years now, and I've been building FinTech and other digital banks for the past 8 years. We're also very excited about our launch of our new office in Hong Kong, which will be opened by our partners at Smart Capital, Michael Brooks, and Donna Winston. We appear to be having a lot of echo. Team, are we on that? Looks like it's gone. I'm sorry about that, guys. We'll try that again. So Vacuumlabs has a bunch of engineers, and we build fintechs and banks around the world. About a year and a half ago, we were in discussions with a bank in Hong Kong where we've been building their virtual bank. And our developers kept coming back to us saying, we have to open an office in Asia. We have to open an office in Asia. We're so excited about what's happening. So we're still struggling here. With the sound. Anyway.
Should be back on now, Michael, so please continue.
That's okay, thank you very much. The excitement of our developers who are out working amongst you guys in Hong Kong sort of caught up to us. And about a year ago, we were in Hong Kong and met with Donna and Michael of Smart Capital. So it's time to expand to Asia. So we are here to learn, to listen, and to support the build of all of the exciting projects that are happening from India to Hong Kong to mainland China. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel this morning. First of all, there's Tyler Aveni. Tyler, hi, good morning. Thank you for being with us. Michelle Lee of AMTD Digital, Anish Achuthan from Open, and of course, Jessica Lam at WeLab. To start us off today, I'd like to go around the panel a little bit and ask the question, what does the term ecosystem actually mean to you? And where do you see you and your firm, your role in making this ecosystem work? Michelle Lee from AMTD, let's start with you.
Sure. At AMTD, we created this very powerful ecosystem. We call it AMTD SpiderNet ecosystem. So basically, through our business partnerships, we accumulated all the trust from our partners and also innovative companies along the way, including fintech companies, technology companies across Asia. So with that, we come up with this idea that we combine the capability of all those ecosystem partners to build this integrated one-stop fintech platform. So that's what AMTD Digital is trying to create. So in Hong Kong, we have the Airstar Bank, which is one of the virtual bank here in Hong Kong. It's a joint venture with Xiaomi. In Singapore, we are going after the digital bank license there together with Xiaomi again. Also, we have under AMTD Digital, we have several ecosystems subsequently becoming subsidiaries, including PayPal as an insurtech company, FormalPay as a payment company, and also Cabridge, which is a private equity exchange. So we are combining the capability of all those subsidiaries, ecosystem partner, bring them onto the platform. So at the core, it will be the digital bank. So around that, we will have several fintech services as well. Outside of that, we would have digital solutions for consumers and SMEs. So to really bring that end-to-end digital experience to them. So that's how the ecosystem works at MTD. We are continuing to acquire innovative entrepreneurs onto this ecosystem so that they could be part of that integrated experience. So we encourage more entrepreneurs to join this network to really provide that one-stop solution to their customers. That's about AMTD.
Wonderful, Michelle. Thank you very much. Tyler, what about you?
Great, thanks, Michael, and also thanks for getting up so early for all of us to moderate today's discussion. So, you know, so ecosystem is a great question because we see a lot of topics around ecosystem, and I do think people have a very different idea of what that means. You know, I think we do see a lot of, you know, what was just mentioned in terms of being a one-stop platform and having, you know, connections with a lot of entities. When it comes to WeBank and our own business, because we're not relying on one channel, we do believe that ecosystem can be a series of partnerships. And so basically within the digital ecosystem itself, it can be a platform, but it can also certainly be embedding services in many other different channels where the customer is interacting or interfacing with a number of other third parties. And I think from a business perspective, having a multi-channel viewpoint on how to build ecosystem, and you know, and that can include your own channels as well. I think that's really key. I think from a technical perspective, one area that WeBank has really you know, pioneered and has been in the open source work from, I think within virtual banks, the idea of open sourcing and making freely available IP for the community to use is, you know, borrowed heavily from obviously the high tech space, but it's really opened up opportunities for us to lower the barrier for technical collaboration with a number of third parties as well. And I think increasingly as virtual banks take form and develop, as they have over the last 5 years in China, we'll see that the technical capability and innovation will kind of grow into its own space in terms of building ecosystem as well.
Right. So for those of you at home, right, we have two different views here so far of what ecosystem actually is, right? There's Michelle's AMTD version, and there's Tyler's so far. Next, Jessica, what's your take on the word ecosystem, and where do you see yourself? Ms. Lam, you're on mute.
Such a rookie error, so embarrassing.
Story of our lives, don't worry.
What I was saying is I'd like to cherry pick from Michelle and Tyler because I think it's the best of both worlds. You know, there's no one size fits all. It's about what works for you, your organization, and you as an individual. I think the way we see the ecosystem actually is it's a number of different things. One is us coming together for this event in itself is sort of bringing together the fintech ecosystem, as well as those who are a little bit curious and want to know a little bit more, right? Those could be guys who are a little bit more traditional and are not technology companies or don't know how to work the unmute button like myself, or those who are, you know, are a lot more sophisticated and a lot more technological. That to me is actually extremely important as well. Because if you think about it, it is about introducing these newer concepts or differentiating concepts to people who are not part of your ecosystem. You know, you and I speak the same language, so it's really easy for us to have a conversation because we get each other. But the crux, I think, to a lot of it is how do you invite those who don't understand this, who aren't as comfortable as you know, understanding what a virtual bank is, right? So we launched our WeLab bank publicly last week. You know, we've been running a fintech for 7 years in Hong Kong and China and in Indonesia. Every market's very different, right? The customers that we need to handle, you know, their preferences are very different. We also sell our technology as a B2B service to our enterprise customers. They are also very different. I think to me, an ecosystem is how do you connect and communicate with other people outside of your comfort zone, right? So we've done, I think, a reasonably good job with our internal employees, which we need to continue to do. But above and beyond that, it's like, how can I talk to someone who is not part of this? If they're here, there's probably some self-selection, right? Because they're probably a little bit interested. It's the ones who aren't here. And I think that is part of our role, which is what Tyler said, which is more open source, so it's more collaborative on the technological side. And I think Michelle is about, well, we've got a number of different subsidiaries within our pocket, and then we can spread the love that way. For us, I think it is a combination of that. You know, we don't need to own a company or build a company to be a part of that. We can have strategic partnerships where we just leverage off each other. And we do that with a lot of, well, not a lot, but we're doing it with more and more traditional industries, right? And sort of seeping into that part of it. That, to us, is another way that we can look at ecosystem. It doesn't need to be a one-stop shop where you own absolutely everything on one app. That also works for some as well. So I think it depends on the market in which you operate, because operating in Hong Kong may not be the same as Australia, may not be the same as if you're going to a different state in the US, you know, which is a little bit more local, etc. So I think it's about knowing your audience and knowing what works within that regulatory framework and that ecosystem or that environment as well. So I think that's sort of the combination of how I'd look at everything.
I think one thing that you said is really interesting, and I do want to come back to it, about the reality of the market that you're entering, right? There are some markets where there's already established players that you can really leverage, right? And it sort of save you quite a bit of time and most importantly, money, right? To accessing those end customers. Anish, we had a great conversation this morning, very early for me, but it was still very, very useful. What about ecosystem to you? I know in particular, you're leveraging an existing banking license, unlike our friends in China and Hong Kong. How does that make you a little bit different and your experience different?
Thanks, Michael. In fact, I agree with the rest of the panelists, and I also feel that there is no standard definition on the ecosystem. It all lot depends on the market you operate. So for us, we were one of the early players, in fact, the first player in India to actually come up with an SME neobank. And for us, the ecosystem means partnering with the banks on one side, because we didn't have a banking charter, so we had to actually leverage on the license and the infrastructure of an existing bank. But what we actually created is that we realized that business banking is broken for small businesses. And if there is a way in which we can actually bring in banking and financial automation tools together in a single platform, that can add a lot of value to the larger medium and small businesses, which is around 50 million is the size of the market. So for us right now, the ecosystem comprises of banks, the SMEs, and then our partners, which could be like the accounting providers or payroll providers or value-added financial service providers. Now, one interesting thing which has also happened over the last 3 years is that just because we have to partner with banks, we ended up partnering with around 18 banks, and we realized that a lot of fintechs struggle when it comes to going live with a particular bank. The average go to live is anywhere between 12 to 18 months. Regulations, compliances, all of them are like blockers. So since we had actually built a core platform, now we are extending that to other fintechs to build various fintech services on top of it, whether it is like in an international digital bank want to come into India and go live, or even it's a domestic fintech want to build a payment service, they can actually leverage on our APIs. So that's how we believe the ecosystem is shaping up, in my personal view.
That's great, Anish. You bring up a really, really important topic, is that, there's so many of us building, investing, et cetera, in the fintech space, but there is sort of a chasm that has to be crossed, which is going live, right? Or really being able to operate legally or leverage existing banking systems, right? Which brings me to a topic that's very near to my heart, which is how incumbent players really can play pivotal roles here, not just by investing or thought leadership, but actually providing some much needed support, right? Jessica, do you have anything to add to that, that piece there?
Yeah, I think you've hit it spot on, which is how can incumbents, whether it is financial institutions or fin players or tech players, or also those who seemingly don't have anything to do with it. Maybe it's healthcare providers, maybe it's just corporates who own malls, etc. As they're sort of leaning in and embracing new technologies, let's just give it a go, right? In that sense, right? So when we started this company 7 years ago, we literally had, a handful of people, and in terms of where we are right now with 45 million users. So, we've always kind of been a little bit of a smaller person, and we're really grateful that we had the opportunity to grow to where we are today. And so as we still work with partners, we will still not be as big as a WeBank or a Tencent or something towards that sense, but you need to find your niche and be damn good at that. But then the thing is, it takes two to tango, right? You could be brilliant.
Right.
And as you said, money kind of does talk at the end of the day, right? So as we work with a lot of some of the partners in the ecosystem, we find that a lot of them are struggling because they spend a lot of time building POVs or POCs, right? For some of the larger organizations who want to try something out. And at the end of the day is they never end up going live because
Yes.
all large organization probably wants is a POC, right?
Yeah.
It's
And
fully
it's
off.
sort of like a KPI, right? Right.
So I kind of feel that I think maybe what we need in this industry or this ecosystem is about more collaboration and really helping out each other, which is give them a go. And so really, really grateful for a lot of places who do have, you know, whether it's hackathons or different sort of incubation hubs, and actually use the technology that comes out from a lot of the innovators that come out from it. Now, we are doing that in one small part, but there is a big difference, right? For industries that are non-regulated, it's actually a lot easier. There's a lot more latitude in terms of what you can do. When you operate a bank, a virtual bank, there actually is a lot more regulation, right? So sometimes when you don't pick a service provider, it's not because you don't trust them, it's because there's other barriers that you need to go through from a regulatory perspective. So I think it's about how do you sort of push the envelope, and how can we get more support, whether it's from the industry groups, whether it's for the regulators, to sort of push some of these larger incumbents along so that they're more comfortable and trust fintech companies, right? And believe that fintech companies are here to make everything better as opposed to trying to eat their lunch, right? Hopefully the path 1 + 1 is 3 as opposed to 1 + 1 and it's gonna equal to 1.5, right? So I think a lot of it is mindset, and we're slowly seeing that. I just hope it just moves a little bit faster. That's all.
So Dr. Lam's prescription then for this problem is sort of micro and macro. You're saying that number one, perhaps the individuals that are in these innovation roles need to think twice before they have a fintech spin their wheels, right, and spend their hard-earned VC money on helping them win KPIs, right? And number two, that the institutions themselves need to see themselves more as enablers, right? And there are certainly good examples of that, right, around the world.
There are,
right? I think certainly in Europe and in parts of the Americas, we're seeing that big time. And since I spent most of my career in those two areas, I feel very, very proud of that happening more and more, right? Michelle, in your position, right, at AMTD, when you're doing the ecosystem yourself, right, kind of being the own author of your own story, if you will, how do you feel like you're keeping close to being current and really like meeting consumer demand?
Yeah, I didn't give the full story of the ecosystem. So we have been doing quite a lot to help the community. For example, we are the founding member, corporate member of the Aveni platform. If you heard about it, it's in Singapore. It's the ASEAN Financial Innovation Platform Network. So it's established by IFC-MS. So it's a platform to match the fintech and financial institutions, to help the financial institutions to explore secure, innovative fintech solutions on the platform. So because normally when the financial institution, when they select the technology vendors, right, there's trust issue, don't know if they should use this one or that one. But that platform, the security issue is already vetted by the platform and the regulators. So that's solved. So the financial institutions can upload data to test all the solutions there. So that would accelerate that process. So that's one. And secondly, we established several grants. The one is called the AMTD ASEAN Solidarity Fund, so to invest into all the fintech solutions across ASEAN countries. So that's how we keep us updated to the latest technologies. So in a way that we're not really a closed ecosystem, we are only talk to our subsidiaries, right? We by helping the community, we also come across very innovative solutions. We continue to acquire them into the ecosystem, empower those entrepreneurs. Jessica, you just mentioned about trust. I think for a lot of the smaller fintech companies, this is definitely an issue for them to scale up. So they do, in a way, I feel they do need to join a bigger platform to enhance that trust. The trust will not come easily, right? So there will be a slower process, but if they join a more credible, bigger platform, it will help accelerate that process.
So, Michelle, when you say trust, are you talking about the trust of one company to another or the trust of the consumer embracing? I'll give you an example. I was really, my dad, who's probably watching from Albuquerque, New Mexico, hi Dad. When I saw him download a digital bank, Chime, who we're big fans of, I went, okay, so my trust concerns with this kind of market, my dad, who is not 40, loves it and got us all to download the app as opposed to vice versa. I thought, okay, I think that we might be over the whole trust thing with the banking piece in the United States, right? Is that what you're referring to when it comes to trust, or are you talking more about, you know, my firm building for you guys, for example?
It's twofold, right? One is the trust from consumers. I feel the COVID, my observation for the COVID is that it's actually very helpful in terms of trust from the consumers.
Okay.
When it comes to money, the psychological barrier is quite high for consumers to trust a newer brand, right? So, but with this COVID, so it kind of forced everything to go on digital, right? Before the trust of the bank is built on brick and mortar type of branch. I know the branch manager is there, so that's why I feel safe. I had several conversations with her or him on site, face to face, right? That's how the trust was built. But now everything's going digital, right?
Yes.
So that's forcing the consumer to rethink how to build the trust because all the branches are closed, right? So that's one thing. The second thing is about as a technology vendor, the trust from the financial institutions, that is hard as well. That's what I noticed from the establishment of the Aveni network, because them bring more traditional financial institutions onto the network. Although we are showing 100 catalog, a different type of fintech to them, they keep asking which one I should use, right? They don't want to look at one by one because they don't know which one is more trustworthy than the other. So that's always been the issue when it comes to B2B kind of fintech. So there's, yeah, we need to fix that. We need to accelerate that process to establish trust. Yeah.
But you can't force trust, right? Trust is earned, right? Tyler, we had this conversation, I think it was yesterday or Sunday, I don't remember. All the days since COVID are kind of a blur. But Tyler, we talked a little bit about trust, right? What's your take from your perspective in China?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an important question. And honestly, it differs quite a bit, I think, country by country.
Okay.
The best of you know my feeling on how it worked in China. I think for there are many different demographics. First of all, I mean, China's a very diverse place. Yes. Very many economic and educational backgrounds, right? So traditionally, absolutely. I mean, having a brick and mortar store was pretty essential for building trust. I mean, there are even some very famous cases in recent memory where the fact that, you know, there were actually, you know, some kind of scams where these big banks with actual brick and mortar offices were essentially, you know, stealing people's money. And of course, this was taken very seriously and it was handled. But I think it goes back to this idea that if it's physical, people trust it, right? And I'm not even talking about cash. I just mean just the fact that there's a bank. So being a completely virtual bank, right? So there's no offline presence. And in fact, you know, there's not even cash in, cash out trust, right? So for us, the money's still going through traditional brick and mortar institutions. So in a sense, that is about, you know, that makes things easier for a bank like ourselves. I do think we have to just, you know, realize the fact that, you know, the environment here, speaking about ecosystem earlier, I mean, China's so hyper digitalized at this point that the consumer preferences have, the needle has been significantly moved, right?
Yes.
I think a vast majority, probably somewhere like 80% plus, certainly all the large, medium, and small cities. Like everyone uses WeChat, and most of these people are also using things like Alipay, right? So when it comes to trust, I think it's definitely there. People appreciate the trade-off between user experience and access to certain types of more flexible products that they wouldn't previously had. But it is interesting in that I think that the true litmus test, right, is would someone put their payroll into a virtual bank? And in our case, our focus is very clearly on serving unmet need. And I'm saying unmet need, which broadly is both the underbanked segments that have very little access, all the way up to people that just wish they had a more flexible, better, user experience. And so these types of products and services generally aren't in that category. So we actually, for several reasons, we don't do things like payroll. But we do see that with our existing customers, that trust is built over time. So a lot of people will come in for kind of transactional services or very small sum services, and then over time, you come to appreciate the experience and you build loyalty that way. And then we see that the overall balances held by the average customer actually go up quite a bit over time. And I would imagine that's a very common and understandable thing that will happen. I don't know, using your example of your father, I'm not sure if he would transfer all of his assets into Chime, probably for more than one reason, but he was probably really happy with the experience. And I would guess that over time he would consider moving more of his money there, especially if the products become more diversified, right?
Yeah, that's a conversation maybe for Christmas to have with him, right? I doubt it, right? Only because the way Chime is currently operating, it's leveraging someone else's license, I think, until now, right? And they have had moments like every other, new company where there's been outages, right? And that did sort of panic my dad, going, geez, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. But the way they responded to that consumer, sort of outcry of, hey guys, this is not okay for you to be offline for whatever, was done so elegantly. And I have to say that, we definitely cheer on all the new banks around the world. But when you see one have a crisis and deal with it so well, I think it builds even more trust, right? Letters from the CEO saying, hey, look, I'm with you. I'm sorry that this happened. Here's why it happened, and here's how we're going to fix it, is really magical, right? So I think nobody expects perfection. And when you have made a mistake and are able to own up to it and then do things to remedy the problem, it's pretty impressive, right? Anish, we had this morning a pretty fantastic conversation that'll probably keep going on for years and years. But trust in your case is very interesting, right? So you're serving the SME market, right? And one of the things that we connected on right away was, I have Mexico very, very much in my heart. I spent a lot of time there as a kid. My mom was from there, and of course, as a professional, spent years now in Mexico City and around the country, understanding the underbanked and unbanked, right? And trust being a major issue as to why folks don't rock up to the Santander or whatever great bank is there. Anish, we had sort of both identified that starting with the SME is a great, powerful place to start. Could you chat more about that and your experience in sort of meeting that trust quotient?
Right, Michael. I just also want to take a step back and talk also about, we have two different segments to deal with when it comes to trust. One is like, since we don't have a banking license, we partner with an. And I'll briefly touch upon that, and I'll come to the SME part.
Sure.
When the biggest concern the banks have is like, how do I trust this fintech, which is actually coming on my platform? Because at the end of the day, something really goes wrong, it's actually the bank's, the brand value or whatever reputation that is actually, right? And so that was the biggest challenge for us in the initial days. And what we did was like we actually got through an accelerator program into one of the largest banks in the country, and that's our first banking partner. So that actually helped us a lot. Coming through their own accelerator program helped us in the initial days, and later, rest of the banks started following. Now coming to our target segment, the SME market. The good thing about India is that we had this demonetization drive by the government 2-3 years back, wherein the lot of efforts were there from the government to promote the digital cash. So that actually led to a lot of P2P consumer services like Google Pay and Phone Pay becoming like the default platform for most of the Indian consumers whenever they do transact. And then, so that actually created a lot of, for the general market, people felt that, okay, now for a particular service, I can actually start using a fintech. But when it comes to specifically to SMEs, your business checking account is what your, that's actually your, it's actually very difficult for somebody to change or move it to an unknown player when it comes to managing your entire.
Sure.
But then we realized that there is a lot of challenges that small businesses go through when it comes to tracking cash flows and managing their entire business finance. So we actually use those hooks initially as a transactional service to get them on board. And later what we have seen is like the deposits started increasing. So we have now around 500,000 small businesses on the platform and close to $1 billion in terms of business checking account deposits. So the early adopters essentially came on board. They started spreading the word to the rest of them. And we don't right now feel too much of an issue in terms of the trust. And the initial days when we launched, we also heavily used to use the leverage on the brand name of the partner banks. We always used to say that business checking account powered by X bank.
Right. Anish,
yeah,
that answer was that answer is great. I love how we've all answered these things before. So the autopilot goes on, right? So just to be clear here, you're saying that number one, you had a trust issue when it came to the banking partner that you wanted to work with, right? Sort of them not trusting you. And then to meet the consumer trust, or in this case, SMEs, you used great sort of other great services like accounting services, et cetera, that folks already trusted or would use to hook them in that way. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that is correct. But Michael, one question which I also wanted to throw up generally to you is that we have now seen a lot of the stress issues actually happening especially in the European market. I don't want to really name about the banking as a service provider, which is actually going down. Even in India, we had an issue with one of the larger banks, which is actually went down in the 3 months back. So going forward, I think this is actually a question for the entire ecosystem on how do we build the consumer trust, because these things are actually, I think, affected a lot in terms of the confidence, especially when I'm seeing like some of the articles on LinkedIn, especially on the European market with the current, whatever it is happening over there. Would banks trust a third-party banking as a service provider? So these are
that's
things
a really great look. That's a question that I think we're all dealing with here in Europe, right? And certainly as Asia surpasses us in innovation, we're going to see a demand for this BaaS service, right? Banking as a service. Obviously, you're alluding to the Wirecard issue, right? Which is the big one that I think we all dealt with for a while there, and we'll keep dealing with. I believe that if you're going to build something that consumers are going to trust with their hard-earned money, or a business will trust with their hard-earned money, right, and sort of trust that platform to make that bit of your life easier, you're going to have to build a platform that has lots of redundancies, right? And that's not cheap. Right? It's not inexpensive to build in 2 or 3 other payment providers or to really think about a worst case scenario. But I do believe that we have to be very, very clear when fundraising for these things that, doing everything on the cheap is not the way to go, right? And we've got to spend more money and more time and leverage other people's expertise to make sure that what we're building is safe for our consumer. Right? We wouldn't certify a plane to fly without 9 or 10 redundancies of every single part of that plane. Similarly, when folks are depending on a digital platform for their livelihoods, right, or to hold their money, like Tyler says, right, that ultimate sign of trust, which is here's my monthly deposit from work, it's got to be built perfectly strong, right? And so I think that we're in generation 1 of banking as a service, and I think that it's going to require 2 major steps. Number one, that if you're going to build a BaaS service, banking as a service provider, you've got to build it with every possible redundancy and plans, and almost be a little bit more tightly regulated. Sorry to say it. And number 2, when you're building the actual fintech, that you have investors that understand that you're going to have to spend a little bit more money, right? The ROI here can be massive. So spending more time on building stronger tech built by people who know what they're doing, like Vacuumlabs, sorry, shameless pitch there, really does make a difference, right? And so I think it's time to wake up and quit treating fintechs like they're a cute app. They're not. They're serious companies doing serious work. which then I think will have the effect of your banking partners being able to trust you a little bit more, right? And so I think it's going to require all of us to do this. There's no question that banking as a service is here to stay, I hope. But it is incumbent upon us to be really, really critical of those bills and to watch each other's back, right? Is that helpful to you, Anish?
Yeah, that's it.
Right. And I realized that the Wirecard issue was not tech, right? But the folks using Wirecard, right, could have built-in redundancies on their platform. Wirecard, we have no idea yet what's really happened there, and that'll take a while to unravel, right? Showing that that's a little bit of human error and human behavior, but I'm not here to, comment on that really, right? There's a question that popped up here. I want to be clear that for me as a fintech builder, it's about being conscientious of the consumer and honoring their hard work by doing our hard work and spending more money upfront to build strong tech. Jessica, comment on that?
I mean, I think on that point, right, is yeah, we need to build strong tech, and obviously we need to build what is relevant for the audience at the end of the day. But also have a little bit of foresight and plan ahead for things that are unexpected. So we launched our bank last week, and a lot of people have asked us, they're like, what do you think about launching a bank in these uncertain times? And it was actually really, really interesting because our first reaction was, this is exactly the right time when you should be launching a virtual bank, right? And Tyler and Michelle, you guys have been there, right? This is exactly why you need a virtual bank, right? Because this is when you need to be, hunkering down at home because social distancing is super, super important, right? However, all of this has been in the works for 2 years. And so the foresight is 2 years ago, people are like, oh, why are you trying to battle against incumbents? What is the point? There is no point of all this, right? And this is the foresight that, all of us are in together, right? To say that all of this is important. You need to get your UI UX right. You need to get your tech stack right. You need to put in all the hard yards such that today in these times, we are able to press go and just go. If we thought about this in January, there's no way that we could have, just pieced everything together in such a well put together form. So my point is you do need to take a little bit of a risk and maybe plan something 2 years ago where people think you're a little bit nah. And I think even as you talk about it with VCs or different people, right? I think even before when we were going through the licensing process, a lot of people are kind of like, but why? Why do you need this license? I don't understand it, etc. There's a number of incumbents who got a license, and I'm sure people probably ask them as well, why do you need this? What's the point, etc. And I'm sure things have changed quite a lot now because suddenly it's relevant. And I throw a classic example in this, which is when the first generation iPhone came out, everyone was kind of like, oh, that seems really cool, but that just seems too techie for me and it's so expensive, I'm never going to use that, right? When the second, third generation came out, people started to get a little bit more comfortable, and now our parents use it, right? It's just like the normal thing. So hopefully in the future, anything that has to do with technology, whether it's a virtual bank, whether it is, all these things which you and I all feel are hygiene, will actually become hygiene in the mainstream environment. Remote onboarding to us is not rocket science, right? To a lot of people, oh my goodness, that is amazing. You could open an account in 3 minutes. Like, how is that possible? So sure. I think all of this stuff is about how do you get the technical tech stack in place, but how do you change people's acceptance and mindset? And then along with that is coupled with the trust that you will build to the customer so that they're willing to do that. And then as that kind of keeps growing, then what we can do in terms of the magic of actually building in fun, amazing, really, really useful features, and then pushing the needle a little bit more, that will proliferate itself a lot more. But I agree, it will take a little bit of time. But let's keep planning, right? Because otherwise 2 years from now, we'll be like, oh, should we start now? No. You should start now to plan for what will be ready in 6, 12, 18, 24 months from now.
Jessica and I were just talking this morning about, I told her a little story. I had written the word pandemic down as reasons to build a digital bank 2 years ago, right? Because I watch the news, right? And look at history, hello, right? And I think, you know, that's really accurate, right? So that's great. Michelle, over to you. Quick question for you. What do you think when you look out at Asia, right? And the ecosystem that you are obviously building and that you're promoting, what's missing besides trust, right? Because I think we've established we need to build that up. What else is missing from your perspective, Jessica? Sorry, Michelle.
I would say what is missing, but there are areas we need to improve. Number one is talent. I do think globally there's a shortage of real fintech talents, the kind of talents and maybe middle level management that really both understand the technology itself and also the regulatory implications and compliance requirements from the regulatory side. So we need the kind of talents have the combination of both sides of the story and also understand the needs of the customers. So that's why we put a lot of efforts to cultivate the talents. We have a PhD program here with Polytechnic University here, a PhD in fintech, but it's more not academic PhD, it's more like a professional PhD type of program. Also in Singapore, we have 2 fintech leadership programs together with universities there and also Xiaomi. So the goal is really to cultivate this new generation of fintech leaders that really understand the needs of the markets and also the technologies available there. A lot of technologies, they are not really cutting edge, right? So, application of the older technologies, right? So that's what we are doing on the talent side. And the other thing, I think, is the mindset of the talents. Well, in traditional banking, well, we as a fintech player or digital finance player, we are still hiring a lot from the traditional financial sector, but the mindset of the traditional financial sector is still pretty much product focused, right? When they think about innovation, they innovate product, they think about what should we sell to the customer? A lot of times it's about the customer experience. Now, your branding, the trust from customers, a lot of it is relying on your customer experience nowadays, right?
Sure.
So we need to change the mindset of the talent, of the management, of all the financial institutions and in fintech sector. So that's what we are focusing on right now.
Wonderful, thank you for that. I have to apologize. I'm getting a note from Mushir saying take questions, but my Q&A spot is blank, so I can't take any questions, unfortunately, due to a digital issue. Before we wrap up, are there any last words you'd like to send us out on? Something inspiring, make us feel excited about what's coming next. Anish, let's start with you. You're on mute, Anish.
Yeah, I think the future is more about fintechs and banks working very closely.
Great. Okay. Tyler, any last words of any sage advice? Any love from China, Tyler? Go for it.
Yeah, well, it's been a great paddle, so thank you for that again. And, you know, I think I would say in the short run, the immediate future, with no betting of COVID in sight, I would say probably look for actually a kind of a reinsurgence of blockchain cross-border solutions. I think a lot of built-in trust will be required in the near future to solve some of these B2B trust issues that were mentioned earlier.
Okay, great. Michelle, last word.
Yeah, I would say I look for more fintech or incumbent financial institutions to launch digital tools for the SMEs and consumers to digitalize their journey, right? To help them digitalize their supply chain, payments, everything. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Great. And Ms. Lam.
So I'd say be a champion for this. When we leave this session, talk to someone, share the love, infect one other person who is not part of this ecosystem. It will make a huge difference if we keep spreading this message, you know, get them to open a virtual bank account or something new that they've never tried before, get them comfortable being uncomfortable in terms of what they're doing. That will go a long way because sometimes it's always about taking the first step.
Love it. Love it. So listen, on behalf of everybody at VFF, I want to thank everyone for their time this morning on the panel, and you guys watching us from your bedroom or your office or your home office. I guess my last word is that Vacuumlabs and me personally are very excited about being in Asia soon physically with you, and you'll all be invited to our launch party, and I hope to see all of you and help you guys build the future of fintech. I think the one thing I always remember, whether I'm in some big bank or working with a small fintech, is that we're doing this for the people that we love and care about. And I think that fintech changes more lives than other parts of tech, right? And it's really important the work that we're all doing. Thanks very much and have a great day.